Tsangmala chashitela nga kawain ani during bedzep lotong ki chego ditok la pepar tujinang during ngaso kuchen la gungo cheton tenzin namgyo pepyo gungo cheton tenzin namgyo ni kalon jiwa nangyong pare di kala kongi gongsa jawron boche choki gongba yakpo shingi yore kong ngaso lobi dip dong jiwa chimbo chagi yore Dila pepper tujinang kungo unsunabino.
아니 땅에 벽에다 이제 제가 되고 있더라. 대해서 개발도 와. 나 당고대 먼저 차대디 들이 드링 쳐야 돼. 들이 ethics for the new millennium. 참 망체게 킹글 때 차대디 깨라 친구를 쳐. 이내디 가르치는 가좀 남래. 안디나 수배 닝도는 가르래. 이 개발 가르침을 해서는 야미 망치가 치야요 말. 당한도 별로 수제제 차배 있는 남자에 오실래나 저 시시 아니야 드셔 봐. 문에잖아. 저 친구네 있는 로고 거리. 로베 맞아. 저는 정말 가시려고 거리. 안디네 랍지는 거리. So today I'm going to speak a little bit about ethics for the new millennium. This is a well-known book by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And it has very useful information for an individual as well as society. But as I was saying in Tibetan, very often Tibetans know this book, about this book, and when they get it, they will say, put it on the head and then put it near the altar or in a bookshelf and never read it. So we are now at a stage, both in Tibetan society as well as Tibetan American society, when we are introduced to an important book, we should read it. And if possible, we should read it several times or through the years. This is not like a comic book you read once and throw away. Every now and then you should read it. So why is this book important? It's important because it's an unusual book for His Holiness. His Holiness has written many books, but they're all about Buddhism. Some are introduction to Buddhism, some are His Holiness' personal interpretation of certain texts and how it helps an individual to learn and practice Buddhism. 여름 진게 차디 마고 가슴 나. 더 장가 쓰는 더 납주 죽주세가 직신 냐니 얘기기래. 이내 망체 낭주의 모두 낭주의 냠네. 봐. 아니 찌르 펜바 게르 펜바 지도를 펜바다. 산계기 고반 줘야기. 다 납쳤어 그래. 근데기 차디 가슴 나요래. 이 멤버 아니 낭주의 냠네 지나고. They message or said that Tarishya Di. So what's different about this book is, let's start with a small query. What are the most important religions in the world? One?
Christianity.
Christianity. Another one?
Muslim.
Muslim. Islam.
Judaism.
Judaism.
Buddhism.
Buddhism, yes. The back.
Hinduism.
Hinduism.
I know it was in the book somewhere. I don't remember how to say it. Like Zoroastrianism.
Yes, Zoroastrianism.
Zoroastrianism.
Zoroastrianism from Persia or what's now Iran. So all these religions, there's so many religions, and religion and religious history is very important for all human beings, because these religious traditions may be the oldest stories we can tell as human beings. Right? And so what's the distinction between among these religions? So let me say in Tibetan, so yentanda kadishu ruba, ta zamling na chuluka kariyores, and kondo sangme yaw kingu dunga, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, siadi, tesa Iran se ngamu inu Persia re, ani chulu shambadinde yore, ta pena 아주 변할 변배추를 reveal Shinto seyorwa. In addition, Shintoism in Japan, Jainism in India. So there are many religions. So what is the main distinction among religions? That's a very important factor to know. Anybody with a hint on what's the main differences among all these religions?
What God you believe in?
Yes. Any other distinctions? Okay, so this is a very important distinction among all the religions. Is there are two main differences. One that believes in God the Creator, as a Buddhist would define it, and some that don't have God. So this is a very important distinction you should know from now on. So Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they are all, including Hinduism in a different way, all believe in the idea of a God that creates the world, the universe, and God who is the person or power that will free you or save you or liberate you. And there are several religions that do not have the idea of the God. So that among them is Buddhism and Jainism. And there may be others too, but the most well-known are these two. 그 점블링의 출로 장면 날 임시 치슈에 등한 저 신고하지 답로 중dun에 신고하지 니 어르스 출로 카치고 덤바소 스미아죠 덤바 점블링 직대 땅안 저 배나 직대 거고 쓰고래 점블링 수용해 아니 덤바데 이지샤나 겹통에 아니 몇 가수래 딱 직대 용수 거봤던 게 들으셔야지 딱 인지 생각하는 God 쓰고 봐 가시는 알라 쓰고 답에 점블링 수용해디 하데레스 하데를 겹쳐는 아니 가리네 디를 마시 겹쳐 조사요 말했어요 디다 주로 같이 그들이 다 디나 예수다 가졌다 또 예배 맞세 단다 그래서 힌두이디나 추고와 이네 힌두게 탐만건 안에 점블링 수용해지다 브라마 있어야 돼 이네 딱 한다 디 이지요 딱 근데 그 군조질 이지 맵 수요라서는 폐쇄 낭받소체 디네 젠세아리요 딱 야하나 슐루 첨부지리 닝벌에 낭배산 추도 잡을 젠세 그디 MJD 캠보레스 주아이 So when you know this distinction that there are these religions called believe in God or God theistic, they believe in a deity, and religions that don't believe in a God. Especially from the Buddhist point of view, we believe in Buddhism, we do not believe that the Buddha is the savior. Buddhism believes that you are your potential savior. So that's the very important distinction. 그다 임지 최유에보다 최매에 나는 것도 남바도 최유에 나네 군조세 과세 이지메데 캐주 치슈 가르스는 군조 이지 중에서 타메 딱잡 주서도 군조 메시로 소용 말 쓰고 봐. 수수 가르체 뭐 가르 야 그제 재미네 타마 가소라 타발 로마레스 군조 병마 잡나 그 이슈나 레디스를 봐. 당도 뒷박 가세 싸위네 타마 이슈 좀 발라 다 겹쳐나 아니 단단한 turbulence. So as I was explaining in 그 도시체 그 남바 산제에 최대 조카레스 산제에 먼저 타브라니 태는 것이 순고 말다. 소소상 계브르스 어느 동에다 냐만에 터그레스. So in Buddhism, as I was saying, Buddha did not say, I will save you and I will take you to heaven. Nothing of that. Buddha says, you are your liberator. You have the potential to be a Buddha like me. So that's the biggest distinction. 이슈출로 됐다. 딱 hinger와 이슈출로 딱 하시면 이슈출시다 럽도 랍락하다 창문 럽도 야고 책을 했을 거리. 아니 이네 소소 메제나라 만디봄 할도 보고마 그 민세 독자 가르쳐비네 타마데 이슈 덤바 군조를 겹쳐나 이거 참은 더진실 타제 남산 회의를 연보로 해거렸어. 다디 개발 치슈드나 남배나디 호말와 이것은 레귤 데스야죠리스 좋아. 아니 타도 고유나 소소한 게다 상계 도시오스. 그디 MGD 당고셔야. So why I'm trying to give you this basic understanding is, if you understand this very basic idea of religions that believe in a God, or that there's somebody out there will save you, and Buddhism that has a different idea that you are your potential savior, it's a big distinction to make. And if you understand that, then you will understand why this book is interesting and important. So this book, in a way, is not about Buddhism, but since His Holiness is brought up in Buddhist training, Buddhist learning, it has influenced him and impacted a lot. And then based on his own learning in life, His Holiness has had a lot of difficult periods in his young age, and he had a lot of challenges and struggle in his early life. And then he also interacted with the rest of the world, and so he had a completely different perspective on what religion should be and how modern society should evolve. 그게 주야의 가르쳤다. 차대비 믹스를 쓰고 가르쳤는 시대인데 군주기 남주기 돈에미 고노 춘준이야 차바스에브레 로미에 시에브레 아니 이네디 남주 탭미세 말다 미세 말레슈 남주 탭 말레스 가르쳤는 디나 군주 시자 남바산제가 따와 캠베 톨 고노 충두네 공에 먹고 태봐 냠뇨 담에는 먹고 좋은바 안데 내 공로 여스피도 버집에 가메다 된데 걸 먹고 친 가서다 냠뇨 사바사나바 안디 톨 공로 여스피도 치 점블링다 저완난제 다 체르버제 출루샹베 메나레 지도샹데 슝에레 출레 이제 균메르레 체르버레 돈소녀보 파서 들레난제 아니 다 군주랑 그 공주 소로에 사바치 등적이 지도라 미케르발라 팸바카르치아도 지도를 팸바카르치아서 디디날 세고래 그 뒤에 임지디 케모레스부터 가르쳤잖아 차대비 로드 인지미지 남버지 고요만. So as I was saying, because of His Holiness's vast exposure after his Buddhist learning to the rest of the world, in the when he was only in his late teens and early 20s, he had to leave Tibet. There was great tragedy, pain, death, suffering, refugees. He had to deal with that at a very young age, because not that he said, oh, I'm going to volunteer. No, he didn't. He had to do it because nobody else could help the Tibetans the way he could. So he had to put a lot of effort in, and later on, to make the effort of Tibetans in preserving our language, our community, he had to work really hard to get resources and find ways to do that. So it's based also on his life experiences, and later on in his life, because he was in a free country in India and he traveled, he got to meet many other people of different religious faiths. He got to meet other scholars and scientists of different traditions, scientists and non-believers, people who are excellent at technology or business or whatever, but no interest in religion as such. So this book comes out not as a Buddhist book. So whenever you talk about it to anybody, you should say, this book called Ethics for the New Millennium is not about Buddhism. It may have some basis in Buddhism, because His Holiness grew up in Buddhism, but a lot of it is from his own life experiences and his ideas about how we should work in resolving our own personal challenges and difficulties, and how society, the whole world, should operate. So that's a very important part that we should mention. 그다 차대든 아닌도 가려라서 내 단도 쉬는 시제 남주 걸 말이데 남주 시대엔 토라 메시지 꿀에 줘봤다 안냠네 냠뇨 타면도 좀 봐. 학바도 슈를 대범매배 미만 보시는 군도 제어 봐. 가시 세르버 세례게 내제 토고 가시 직접 준다 송을 뺐 남주 친부친 전부 세례게 되는 이네 로아 미지기 내다다 미지기 디기네다 그 김장기 대화도 있네다 된전 양용시도 전부 그제 유네다 너르 그제 유네다 봐 왕다 그제 유네다 밑상을 강에다 두고 집어유디 다 군주네 예 가서 공정 모저 중부터 첩지 아니 공주는 거 그 뒤에 차들기 내가 열세 직들이. So when I mention about this book and why it's important is, as I was just saying, His Holiness has met some of the most famous people in the world, scientists who've solved problems that people have been unable to resolve for hundreds of years, businessmen who've become so successful that the size of their business and their wealth is almost immeasurable, right? We are talking about, for example, here we may talking about $100, or I have $1,000 in my pocket money, or whatever. These people are talking about hundreds of billions. And then His Holiness also met people who are, as I said, modern day successful people in whatever field they are in, or medicine or tech world, but no interest in spirituality or religion. But in the course of meeting all these different people, successful and otherwise, His Holiness has run into so many people who do not find full satisfaction in their lives. They have challenges just like we have. They have family issues, spousal issues, community issues, and sometimes environmental issues, and issues that all of us also face in a different way. And all these people who come and speak to His Holiness, then they too are trying to find out, how do we live a peaceful, happy, productive life? They have all the material resources, but they don't have an inner spirituality. So this book, as I said, is not a book about Buddhism, but based on His Holiness' experiences and his suggestions, this comes about. 그다 차대대 민 갖다나요서는 이지나 ethics for the new millennium series. 다 new millennium series 그뒤에 노조나 로동다레 두두다 millennium 사와세스 지고와 그 들을 니슈접주 고추 외갑대로와 그 new millennium 사들이 책도 국제사야 된도 예내다 예동시도다 등득이 두렵지 않냐 로동다니 심백갑대 심베데 millennium 스거와 다 millennium 사바디 아니 ethics 다 ethics야 책도 망체 부인할 패치 수름세 주나요다 다게 인지나 좋아 이날 차들도 교리하다 차로 주는 게 조직 계시 두는지 몰라 그 수름세요 다 수름세도 지단다 지조나 줄람 소르 추억이 거사 추억이 랍지 책이 멤버체 그거 친한 추지 배주 담아 남체 등록이 책 ethics야 배주다는 거. 다 ethics야디 대상 배주 먹고요. 녹조 지조나 안디에 사바를 지리 너무 있는 내가 싫어 망체 팀그团해라 봐. 팀그团이 초그래 초그 말했어야지. 다 대상 흉기 뒷소리 속박기도 만고나 ethics 기 연구에서야디 레고 ethics도 팀도 직원의 레마리 딕먼지세 멤버체 수든 기내세스 레고도 세야기 딥호테고 so His Holiness gave this title to the book, The New Millennium. So I assume most of you know what millennium means. Millennium is usually 1,000 years, 1,000 years. So according to the common usage of the human history, when the 19th century ended, right, or the 20th century ended, when the 21st century started, it's a new millennium. So that's why he chose the title New Millennium. Human history may go back 6,000 years or so, but the way we count it is 1,000 or 2,000 years before the Common Era, and nowadays we use 2025. Common Era, meaning, or previously it used to be BC, before Christ. I think most of you know that, right? So anyway, so the title is New Millennium, meaning this is the new 1000th year that's beginning, and His Holiness chose the word ethics. So this is not about Buddhist ideas for the new millennium, or Buddhist laws for the new millennium, or Buddhist guideposts. He chose a very different name, ethics, for the new millennium. So anybody define ethics? So ethics, yes, go ahead.
I think kind of like a set of moral laws that you should follow.
That's right. That's very, very, very accurate. So usually in modern society, almost all over the world and even the United States, a lot of rules that we live by, rules or laws, it's always about what is right or wrong according to the law. Right or wrong according to the law. But ethics doesn't necessarily apply just to law. As you just said, it's about there's a moral dimension, or it's more than just rules, rule number 1, rule number 2. In Tibetan, the title has been defined as Sutim. It may not be an exact translation, but in the Tibetan usage, Sutim often applies to the right conduct of a monk, or certain good behavior, good principles that you keep in mind. So this is also very important when you talk about this book. It's not a book about Buddhism. It's for the next millennium, and it's about how we behave properly. You could say that. In short, ethics for the new millennium. So that's the main background introduction to this book that you should be aware of. Now, if you go into this, in one way, it's not difficult to read. If anybody reads it, it's quite straightforward. His Holiness speaks in very simple terms. But then some of the ideas are a little bit complicated, but that should not prevent you from going through it, because His Holiness talks from his personal experiences, some input he's had from older Tibetans, ordinary Tibetans, all kinds of real life experiences. So it's not somebody just talking about theory. So I think introduction, basically this is the best introduction I can give. If I go into too much detail, it may not be helpful at this point, but His Holiness' focus is on how we as individuals in a modern world, a very complicated world, especially for people living in the West now, that means all of you especially. You are living in a very economically advanced society, technologically changing, plus you have issues about your identity as Tibetan Americans, and as people in a very changing world. So this book will help you deal with it. Anye shuya dire ta chadep de ngoto ningdo dindechi shana ya ome rosugo. Ani 상매 chadep de lo na mi na lo debo yor chaco shibudinde tawa kinde sunyo mare. Chikchidu lo debo che. Ngoyo ge kundu aba gembatinde ge nyamnyo de tani bezundinde mango sunyo are. Ya chojo nyamning tone dinde sunyo are. Ya chige ge mi damende shezu da damenda 안치도 담면데나 강에 가르유 메든데고 이나 십도승을 거기서 리벨 멜로나미나 예때나 미소소소 펜도 친구 요래슨도 학바도다 로션버도 지도 컨디션을 두고 할수는 정말인 교와 첨부 침백한 지도지래. 아니 아주 대여고 망치다 누조 지도지나리 봐. 벤조기 퉁기 첨부체. 이간 추제다 교원된 조에다 니르 두고동아 그거 전조 둥개치고래. 하고도 다 법았어. 당한 저선 셰주여와 Tibetan American 세야다 다 디지고 제만 캐나다 요 캐니디언 티베탄 유럽 나요 법았어에 담은 차배가 됐다. 소설 미질 템바 카리치아도 소설을 배벨랍자 남주글랍자 시템베 누구였어 다 누구 내가 사버디 또 펜도요 컨디션도 이때비는 차들이 두면서 시작해요. 그 닝도 모저디 쉬야디 아니 네 저처럼 내야체 아니 네 데드 저에 그냥 디슈 현재도 많고 디스나요래 C learning system Emory University에서 지체 야가다 너무 카시나 롭종나 레비아티 emotional secular emotional training 직전세 뒤에 차대 데드 저요 시저 Emory University의 아메리게 개발체 안미게 맞을 게시 내기 중요죠. 코노지 코란시에 콘도 sö제 정말인 랍다 직수인데 망고나 럽겨왔다. 이 럽다디. 데데 좋아요. 쉬야 가라서는 콘도 전속가 좀나 아니 세리번이 뭐 저래 망고시는 것도 현재 굉장히 많이 나있어. 디날 통계신에다 아니 남절 되어야 예배 미치기 야 탭게다 침부시 emotional intelligence 야지 이 신의 차제 아니 야 점불이나 캐봤다 시리도 좀 토토나치게 먹지기 딜 시시하지 다 딜러고 굉장히 죽준다 이 벤조게 개치고 턴에 부를 롭준제디 등급면도 스타트사 롭준 내세 토버요 튕기사비요 때 신의 심기 턴에 봐 심다 초월 턴에 다 정중칭이 구도 세다 emotional intelligence 봐 그 연조에 디테일이요 레시오 so what I just finished earlier was a brief overall introduction. I think if I went into too much detail, you won't remember and it won't be very helpful. But keep in mind the main features of this book. It's from His Holiness. It's a very non-Buddhist book in a way, and it's about modern realities and how we can benefit with the new ethics in mind in society. And before I open up for questions and comments, you can ask questions, you can even share your own comments and feelings. One other thing I wanted to point out is some of you have heard about C learning, S-E-E learning, and that comes out from Emory University, where some American scholars and also a Tibetan Buddhist scholar named Professor Negi, who's Kinori from Himachal Pradesh, but sort of Tibetan Buddhist community. They put together that learning, and it's a curriculum which is being used in many school systems in many different countries now. And basically, it's about emotional intelligence. So some of you may have heard this term now. It's very sort of popular in the educational world and in the West. And where that term actually comes from is a scholar who has a good background in Buddhism, and he turned around to say maybe modern education is lacking in really educating a person emotionally. Just educating you to be very good in math and science and ability to write or read fluently is not enough. People need to grow up and strengthen their emotional capabilities. So the term emotional intelligence has evolved and is connected to C learning, and C learning is connected to this. So this is like a slow growing, almost like you could say global movement in how to look at education in a different way. So I think we'll end that. look to the pharmacy. Get shares, but damage to them that couple one. Let's say, and things of machine, and mana, yeah. Captain and you did what she said. So let's anybody have something to share or question, you're welcome. Hiron, yes, they. And you can speak in Tibetan if you wish, or English, whichever you're comfortable with. Try Tibetan if you can, and then you can repeat it in English.
Preface lasso that everywhere and in every society, people endure suffering and adversity, even those who enjoy freedom and material prosperity. So, does that mean that no matter where or who you are or what environment you're in, you always feel unhappy because of your materialistic happiness?
Well, in a way, that's true. In this present world, right, some of us living in well-to-do societies like in America, and there may be societies which are very poor and struggling on many fronts. When you get down to the bottom of whether a person or family is happy or not, very often the differences are very little. Now in real material terms, yes, you might have a washing machine here, and in a slum in India you might have to go to a tap with very little water, no water to wash your things. There are some real, issues where you could say relatively you're much happier here. But in terms of as human beings, when we react to people and conditions, this level of challenges or suffering, as you might call it, might be the same. So I think that's how it is. And of course, from a Buddhist perspective, a Buddhist scholar or Lama would say, yes, that's true. It's the nature of our being. There is suffering in the world. Surana, anybody else? Pamasungajane Swayana Surana. Maridi, never do I yet to share with you. Maduta, yet a jishum shitty. But Shadavia wanted to do that. Mango turns out chicks and in Nangme to Mato. Taku do Shada Mango, Kagi, Hakuman, and China purpose in Yugmara. And in a Yubina can make daily in a Yuna. Just say, that Chadek Dam and the Sivan in the Namdan Sote Hoshayore. And did the jail Chadek Joy, Dini Toviore. I think you have a question. Somebody? Yes, Surana.
On chapter 1, page 11, it says, as a boy, there was a time when I was rather more interested in learning about the mechanics of an old film projector. I just want to give a quick comment because I feel like since the Dalai Lama has been raised in such a high authority manner as soon as he was recognized as the Dalai Lama, then later, but even when he was in this kind of regime or position, I feel like that he was still able to have a childlike innocence, which is so incredibly amazing to me because it really does show that all kids are kids and that he was lucky enough to be born like that, even if he could have had all the riches he could have wanted, but he still was able to be how he was because of how humble he was. I just found that interesting. Thank you for coming.
Yes, that's true. As you said, His Holiness grew up in a way in very special circumstances. And as you pointed out, he was very interested in mechanical things. And in this book and others, he would say he used to take people's watches and dismantle them and try to, old-time watches you had to rewind, you had to rewind every day. And only in the early mid-50s, there would be a new automatic watches, which just by shaking it would just go on forever. So anyway, His Holiness used to take out these old watches and try to fix them. And he says every now and then he would not succeed and he had to give back a broken watch. And in this reference, it's about a projector he took apart, right? So His Holiness' natural inclination seems to be very mechanical almost. But then at the same time, he had to study Buddhism because He had 2 tutors, and they were quite strict, and the old way of education was very difficult. But that interest in science and mechanical things also led him to be more curious about the outside world. So when he later came out to the West, shall we say, traveling and meeting others, it helped him because a Lama can come and just talk about Buddhism and the other side will talk about it, and there'll be no connection because your background is different. But because he had His Holiness as a background of interest in mechanical and scientific things, he's able to not only connect with somebody from the tech world, but if he posed a question about the tech world, it would be with some understanding, and then they would react better. So that's how it became rich. 단다디 컨디나에 되려와 군두 공로 중도네 로니에데 투제지 subject 견쇼 디고를 권한게 군주다 아니 디 군두 공부시다 개와 침부라 순수 근데 문에 레스체 군두 차대다 전남나는 거 요할 이 군자 보고서 되시게 왔다 마음에 주도도 상면 니마를 거르게 오르와 개개부터 개그와 아니 지금 보지 업주스와 신의 오토매틱 시스템 구조 시스템들도 다들 상자 상물로다 뒤로봐 그별 다망체 주주님 것도 나와야 되는 담들 가 연쇼치도 군주 dinnage 없다도 같이 이제 subject 이제 잠잠 두고 있다 그렇게 되는 진짜 안 change하지 않나야 근데 전남남 동안 다른 신디 log 주제다 된도 나부터 문에제 subject 견디네 나사 내가 과토월에서 되게 주제다 이게 통한 남디 한 제일 힘들게 점링 서로 지게면은 다 생겼다 좋아요도 이 두번 실수를 했으니 되시죠 알았으나 다 지단라면 얘기 시페비나 낭적 다와디디 식럽 버전에 주 다와셰유네 다 체리시오 이시시 아니 두배 됐어 주는 요말라 또 군도 생일도 통나나 안 체리고 못하니 차됐다 다음에 시기유사 안 버전에 체리 계시에 대체다 갈렌신난도 잡존데 세릭 내주디 킴베토네 아니 남쪽 디셰 근데 안 남산 거자 알레디네 리버스지 두 가지 둔 거라 그다 디 먼저 라마 계시 망고 자원이네 요야 말때 쇼치글 내차제 군도 공부시단다 투냥요다 인소래 담에도 요사 디 두버준 토레스 이제셰디죠
나랑 가는 방식 agree 지송나 공서초 서저 답답하고만 송 디지털 공서초 대나 걸어서나 서저 비교원 줄라 자르다 아프리카 서저 줄라 만져가 comparison 만져가 잘라 베스 마르 마르 만져 잘라 마르 내가 뉴스초래 you ini samna tanu wala at first thought manzo you just the 통기라 manzo 간지 sembatiu chaire manzo 참만이라 이니 가로서는 직치는 manzo 아지 초보수야다 cover the 참마 on the technology the 참마 use the manzo distraction film where you're decisionala 이니 the jar the manzo 참마라 the distraction many program도 좀 제도 wala manzo huge 중거래 이 manzo dela cover 참마다네 이니 TV la YouTube the 참마 유튜브 갑수 manzo 원데 디다네 이니 this journey 당고들 교육을 듣는 뜻이네 this example 교 중교에 되는 여배 중교에 이는 원리 중지가 아리라 depression rates 망고도
데리 제 다도 소불 문에래 냐면 그와다 차들나리 내지 손도와 야가지다 뭐 교를 해 야 미드와다 파도 야가 요르스 단다 손능시 아무래도 다 누죠 통계상 보체 아니 가바다 던들래라부체 쉬고 고화야지 망고체 은 미미 좋아디 배 교르시제 아주 편주시한 가수래 지도를 미초와디 교르고 있어요 이코나가 배정이 호수
상마 야포제성 상비도 상마 투진한 공마 투진한